Hello and welcome to the Wednesday show presented by This is Ibrox. I'm your host, Kyle McLean, as always on the Wednesday. And if it wasn't bad enough for you, Ross, having to sit there, endure not only that performance on the pitch, the result, listening to my chat, we get to do it all again today on Wednesday. First of all, I'll ask you, outside of the football, how are you? How are you getting on? What's been going on?
Outside of the football, I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. The problem you've got is, as most of the Rangers sport will be the same, I'm sure, it's very difficult to separate yourself from the football after a result like that. You feel like it just drags on the whole way through the week, and I'm sure we're all the same. In our workplaces, it's not been very enjoyable this week. There's been a lot of slagging getting done, which that's part and parcel, I suppose, of football. But humiliating result of the weekend, and unfortunately, we're gonna have to all take our medicine on that for a wee while. But yeah, overall, I'm good. I was going to say I was looking forward to this podcast. I don't know if that's technically true tonight, based on what we're going to be discussing. But yeah, it's certainly good to chat with you again, Kyle.
Yeah, listen, I'm hoping this will be therapeutic and we can fill in some of the radio silence that's been from the club. Want to get everybody's thoughts and what's been happening and what's been going on. But in today's show, as I said, we'll discuss that. There's no other word for it. It was disgraceful. The catalyst here is already said. Evening, I'm absolutely scunnered, lads, which I think just sums it up for most of the Rangers support here. How many times we've said that in the past few years as well? We'll go on to that disgraceful performance from the weekend. You and I were, interestingly, we were sat in the press conference with Philippe Clement. I think it's fair to say on more than one occasion we turned round to each other and looked at each other going, can't believe he's just said that. And we weren't the only ones in there. Also got onto the silence from the club because, let's face it, that's 3 days now from one of the worst results ever in our club's history, and we've had nothing, not a peep at all. When are we expecting to hear for these guys? We'll maybe get on a wee bit, seeing as there was some news about the restructuring of the academy today, and maybe a little on Hearts if there's time at the end as well. But Ross, as we know, Rangers lost 1-0 to Queen's Park on Sunday at home. For context, it's the only time in the history of Rangers that we have went out of a cup competition domestically to a lower league opposition. Was that result coming, or was that a freak result? I know that's a bit of a loaded question to start us off here, Ross, but what was your thoughts on the game itself, and has that been coming?
I don't think you can ever say a result of that was coming because of the difference in the levels between the two sides. We spoke about it at the weekend. When I arrived to Ibrox on Sunday, I never thought it was a possibility that Rangers wouldn't win that game. Now, looking back in hindsight, okay, it's maybe a stretch to say, but maybe I should have because of the way this team has been playing this season and the inconsistencies under Philippe Clement. But I think this is another level of ridiculousness, to be honest with you. It's just, I don't really understand how the club managed to get themselves into this position this season. Like, I understand that we're talking about projects and rebuilds and transition and all these kind of buzzwords that go with it. But I don't think this should ever be in the script for Rangers. So like I said at the beginning of the podcast, yeah, humiliating, to be honest with you. One of the kind of sobering aspects of this is when we were leaving the ground after that press conference, it's maybe the mood we were in at the time. But we both agreed that we weren't that surprised that something like this had happened. And we also felt that we weren't as annoyed as we probably should be. And that sounds ridiculous to say, but it probably shows you that a lot of the support this season are just completely disengaged with the club now, numb to it, and even though it's such a poor result, should I say, disgraceful performance, whatever, it's quite sad to come away from the ground and maybe not be as angry as you would expect. And we've all got, I think everyone is the same in the support at this point. Okay, maybe there's a lot of anger surrounding the club the last 3 days because we've not heard anything from them, and there's silence there. But I think overall, I think most of the support probably did see something like this happening. I think we've all speculated about one of those bad results coming because we've seen it under Philippe Clement, right? He goes through periods where he finds a few results and the pressure lifts and then there's just a terrible, terrible result that comes along, and all the pressure builds back on again. So, yeah, maybe we should have expected something like this to come, Kel, but I don't think I expected it to come at home to Queen's Park in the Scottish Cup. I mean, we're not. This is a sizable shock, right? So Queen's Park are 5th in the Championship. They've not really had a particularly good season. And they've come to Ibrox, and I think when that goal went in, I don't think anyone on the ground was particularly surprised when the goal went in, because everyone had the same feeling. I mean, you said it to me 2 minutes before on the gantry. You know what's coming here. You can feel it.
Yeah.
You know what's going to happen, which I think is it's a pretty sad place to be when it comes to Rangers at the moment. And yeah, it's difficult to accept where we are at the moment, and really, I'm sure we'll come on to it. I'm not really sure how Philippe Clement has managed to keep his job after this.
Yeah, I think that's the baffling thing amongst most Rangers supporters now, is that Clement is still in the job. I'm sure. I mean, that's the comments. Alan Henderson here has got an interesting comment. He says it's acceptance which is worse than numb, and I think that we are. As it's an expectation of not being let down. I suppose it has been let down. It's just, it's not. Rangers are not performing as we expect them to at the moment, and it's been that way for longer than it should have been. And it's, there's time for something to change. But listen, as I said, you and I were sat in that press conference, Ross. You were putting out the live feed on the Twitter at the time as to what was being said. Fair play to some of the other fan media in there. Stevie for Four Lads, held him to account. David Edgar as well from Heart and Hand, really, really pressed on the questions they was getting asked, saying, and another one, it was Josh Barry from Rangers Review, when he stepped up and he said, your position is basically untenable. How are you expecting to last here? What was your immediate impression after coming away from that press conference? Did that strike you as a guy that understood the magnitude of what had just happened?
No, simply put, no. I think that was the most surprising thing. And I think when I spoke to you when we were sitting in that room waiting for Philippe Clement to come in, what I wanted from Philippe Clement, it wouldn't, make up for a terrible day at the office. But what I wanted him to come in, and when he sat down, was take responsibility for the result. Own it, right? I know he said it was unacceptable, but I never really felt that he was grabbing it and saying, this is just not good enough for this football club, and that's on me, regardless of whether I've put this team in out and I think the players haven't performed to the level I expect. Ultimately, it falls back on me. This is me, and I'll take the criticism for that. I never really get that from Philippe Clement in anything. That always seems to be that he has quite a lot of excuses ready to go when he comes into these press conferences. And I felt that again at the weekend. Some of the things, I'm sure you've got them listed there, but talking about that, tactics had nothing to do with this game, and a change of manager wouldn't make a difference. Why are you sitting in that seat then? If you firmly believe that a change of manager wouldn't make a difference, then the whole idea of you as a manager is that you make the difference. You are the difference maker. You're the Rangers manager. You produce a team that gets results, right? And Queen's Park goes another level. I'm expecting a Rangers manager to be able to competently beat a championship side in the last 16 of the Scottish Cup, right? I mean, come on. So a lot of his comments, I think, and you mentioned it there in terms of Stevie and David Edgar, they really pressed him on that. Yeah. Which I think was required at the time. Now, I know there's a lot of criticism sometimes of fan media not standing up and saying a lot to the club that the support expect, but it was obvious in the room that Philippe Clement didn't understand the magnitude of that result. He wanted to put it down to a cup shock, that these things don't happen. We had the most shots on goal today, and the most shots in one game all season. Right, so as soon as he started saying something along those lines, you're like, I don't know if you really grasp what's happened here. And I get it. I get it to an extent in terms of he's trying to find a way out and he's trying to wriggle his way out of it. I get it, right? He's on the defensive and understands, but I do think sometimes what would help the support maybe start to connect to this manager a wee bit again is if he just took responsibility. I always think he pushes it back onto the players, talking about there wasn't enough tempo in the first half. And then in the second half, we lost composure and we were rushing things. again, I feel that contradicts, right? You're saying the team are playing too slow. Then the second half, you're playing, the tempo's too high, and you're rushing things. Again, it's like this is on the players. The players didn't perform today. It's on the manager. And I know the players always escape criticism in these things, and the manager seems to get a lot of it. I'm not trying to separate the two really in terms of the players deserve criticism as well. I thought the attitude from every single player in that park was off on Sunday.
Stinking.
You could tell from the first 15 minutes that looked like a Rangers side that had maybe just had the whole Fraserburgh result in their mind from a couple of weeks ago in the Scottish Cup and felt this will probably be something similar. We'll find it a bit of a grind to get through. Once we get through, we'll batter them. And it didn't turn out to be the case. And I actually thought once they went a goal down, the players, I thought again, they mentally crumbled because they started, like Clement said, to rush things, lose their composure. He's right on that. But I'm expecting the leaders in that team to grab everyone and say, look, we've not performed at a level here. We've got 20 minutes here. We can do something. And I never seen that. I thought the game actually kind of petered out a little bit. I know Rangers had some chances, but nothing major. Obviously, the penalty and it's a miss. But yeah, I just think, it's a shocking one, really. I don't really know where else to go from that, to be honest with you, Kel. I just think really, really bad day. And the manager, I just think, again, is not taking responsibility. The last one, and I'll maybe throw it back to you on this, the one I thought was the most surprising aspect, the comment, was when he referenced budgets. You're talking about budgets after a game you've just lost to Queen's Park. Again for me went, I don't think you get it. I don't think you're understanding. If you want to talk about budgets for the rest of the season, fine. But for me, if I'm sitting down with Philippe Clement before I go into that press conference, I'm saying, don't mention budgets. It's nothing to do with that today. Don't say it. And he said it again. And unfortunately, he doesn't like that line when it's used against him. You know what I mean? He used it for Celtic and Tottenham. Look at the budgets. Well, unfortunately, if you use that line, it's going to come back and bite you. And then again, he's referenced it in that presser after the weekend. It's like, I don't know what you thought on that, but that was the most worrying comment for me, because again, it's just he's pointing to an overall project, and this is what we have to deal with this season. This game is not part of the project. It's never going to be acceptable that you get knocked out by a championship side in the Scottish Cup. That's not part of the project. It's never going to be part of a project at Rangers.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you. It's regardless of what is going on at the club, we should never be losing to lower league level opposition, and that was the thing as well. If you remember in that press conference when the two Queen's Park boys got interviewed, I mean, one of the guys he'd been released from Millwall. He didn't even have a club, or nobody offered anything for him. And I think Cam Davison said, "Do you want to come up and see how it is here? We'll give you a 1-year contract," or whatever it was. And he took it purely because he was getting a 1-year contract. I think the goalkeeper was in not too dissimilar situation as well. And they said that when we had it back, I'm sure we saw the graphs on the social media feeds after it as well. And in comparison, the size of their budget was tiny. As soon as they said it against Tottenham, you knew that it was just going to get not thrown back in his face, but it's just sometimes you're just looking for the manager to just be a wee bit more switched on in that, because the very thing that you are complaining about on a European stage, you're in the position that Tottenham are in domestically, and it just makes you look a bit silly time and again. But there's a couple other things. There's quite a few good comments coming here just to sort of sum up the mood of the whole support. Buffalo Albert's what a name that is. He says, as a whole heap, that the manager has to take responsibility for the team as a whole. An out disgrace on Sunday to a man. Pete Lawrence here says, Clement does understand the seriousness of the result, but he's trying to buy time and pull wool over our eyes. Plain and simple, putting Scotland, that'll never work. And Fall Victim here says, whether he understands it or not, before the presser, someone from the club's hierarchy should be explaining to him how awful a result that was, so we don't need to be patronised in our interview. Like I said, I agree with you. There's a couple of things. The one comment, it's almost like you know me already, Ross, here, but there was one thing in that presser that he said, if I could just get it up here, and it was, as you said, he's talking about, was that bit when he said, we go today, we get the most shots on target of all season. You and I were just like, who cares? Like, who cares? Like, nobody gives a shit about that at the end of the day after you've just been embarrassed. It was
It's such a
madness.
vague statistic as well, Kyle, because what does that mean? Where are these shots being taken from? How good is the chance where that shot is? But do you get what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
if I remember from that game at the weekend, we had a lot of long range efforts that went flying over the bar, right? So, okay, you've had a lot of shots. That doesn't mean anything. It doesn't. Ultimately, the statistic that means the most in football and always will is the scoreline. You don't win that statistic, nothing else matters, especially as a Rangers manager. So I'm all for using data to, kind of track trends over a long period of time. And I'm a big proponent of that it can help football clubs to move to another level, right? If they can recognize kind of underlying statistics. But that one game going, we had the most shots of all season today. And it's just unlucky that we've not managed to get the result. It's just not true. You're not being honest with the support, and the support we're not stupid. Do you know what I mean? We watch Rangers week to week, the same as Philippe Clement. We can see all the problems. We spoke about this in the summer, Kyle, way back in the summer. I said it then. I don't see what the manager's trying to do. I still don't see it, right? We've had some good results, but especially in games where we dominate the ball domestically, I don't understand what this team are trying to do. And you've seen it again at the weekend. There's no patterns of play. There's no tempo in their game. There's hardly any movement in the forward areas. We struggle defensively. We're terrible from set pieces. Like, it all lines up, and I don't see any improvements. And I know we'll maybe go on to the kind of the analysing more around the club and the board and things, but if you bring it back to that game, one of the most ridiculous things I've seen from Clement for a while is when he hooked Yanis Hadji for Ridvan Yilmaz. Now, I understand that Yanis Hadji was not having the best game. I get it, right? But if you just put the two players in front of me and said, here's the game state, you're chasing a goal, right? Do you want Yanis Hadji, who's contributed, 10 goals and assists since he's been back in the side this season? Or do you want a left back, Ridvan Yilmaz, whose form has been pretty poor for the last couple of months, and he's also going to play at the position? Who do you think will make the impact? And he's brought in. I don't get it. And that for me was again him making an emotional reaction. Yanis Hadji had just played the ball out the park, if you remember, and Clement instantly went, "He's off. He's off." And again, that comes back. I always think with that, with the management, the players, that like it's just mismanagement for me. That is Yanis Hadji's game. He's going to take risks. That's what you want in those moments. You want someone that can find the pass or find the shot of goal that creates an action for us to. That's what you're looking for in those moments. And he made that substitution. And again, even the halftime ones, Kyle, it's like for like, right? You're taking Barami off, you're bringing Dessers on. I get it. It's a different type of player. He's a striker. You bring Raskin on for Rice. I know Rice wasn't great, but again, he's a young boy and he's trying to bed into it. Did the approach change, though, in the second half? I didn't see Rangers trying to do anything different. Did you? I didn't see anything from that team that I thought the managers looked at this and felt, this is what we're not doing well enough. These are the changes I'll make. I never see that with the manager.
Well, this is the thing that I was going to say on here. He says, if you look purely to the result, yes, it's nothing today to do with tactics or with putting too many other players on or whatever. It was one day that it's one of those days it doesn't happen so much. It's true that you don't have that many chances and you don't score goals. But that is the tactics. As I said, going with Bailey Rice, not starting. Some of the comments that are coming in here. Sid says not starting Raskin for me. That is a tactical choice not to go into that game. I mean, we still had such a strong team and still didn't do it. As Blue Nose John here says, his substitutions are too erratic. See the Hadji substitution at the time. It reeked of Cantwell against Aris Limassol when he reacted to it, because it spread along that gantry like wildfire. They're like, oh, he's passed that ball out. He was furious at him, and I think he was venting his anger at Yanis Hadji when it shouldn't have been vented there. It should have been inward, or or I don't know. But we had the players to go and do that, to do something with that. In fact, like it was it was a very disrespectful comment, I think, to a lot of supporters out there to tell us that there was nothing wrong with the tactics in that game. If there's nothing wrong with the tactics in that game, you don't get beat off Queen's Park 1-0 at Ibrox.
That's Clement taking no responsibility, no accountability, and basically saying it doesn't matter what I'd done or I could have done in that touchline today. It wouldn't have made a difference. That's on the players, what happened there. And this is what I come back to all the time. And it was why at the time, there's no point in going over it, right? Todd Campbell's not a Rangers player anymore. It doesn't matter. And ultimately, he didn't react well at the end and quite rightly left. But that moment there worried me with Clement and kind of managing the players. And if I've got a manager that's constantly going into press conferences and never taking responsibility for anything himself and always pushing it back on the players, I'm not sure how much I'm going to give for this manager in the big moments. That's not me saying it's right, okay? Because you're expecting any football player to go in the park, not really need the motivation of their manager to play for Rangers and give it everything. But we all know how modern day professional footballers work. If they don't fancy the manager, they chuck it. That's not just Rangers. That's every club, and that's the thing that worries me about Clement. I'm sometimes when he does make these kind of moves, I just think, are the players really going to buy into you with things like that? And again, it was the comments in the press conference. What I done today didn't make a difference. The players just didn't deliver. They lost composure. They didn't move the ball quick enough. They didn't take their chances. When do you take accountability for the form, Philippe? When is it your turn to stand up and say, actually, what I'm putting out on this part clearly isn't working? And I think that's where a lot of the support are at the moment. And I think, like I said earlier in the podcast, Kyle, I think that would help him a little bit if he took responsibility. We've seen that with previous managers. Steven Gerrard was great for it. Came in, Rangers got a pure result. He held his hands up sometimes and he said, look, that was on me today. I didn't put that team out in the way it should. I asked them to do things that they shouldn't have, whatever. I'm not expecting them to do that every single week. But see, after a result like that to Queen's Park at the weekend, I'm wanting my manager to face the music. I'm wanting him to come into that press conference and sit there and go, that's unacceptable and that's on me. It's on me. Because really, you take the pressure off the players there, rightly or wrongly, by the way, but you do. You take the pressure off the players. It's all on me. I wasn't good enough today, and that result is unacceptable. And I just don't know if that's ever going to come for Philippe Clement, and I think that's what's hurting him.
Yeah, it was just to sum up the press conference before we go and get on to other things and our thoughts and feelings around it all. It was just the fact that it was almost insulting to hear him come out and go. The attitude was very much, like these things happen. Like, just I'm building a project. You guys all like football. You must know that it's difficult to do these things, but it was just a complete acceptance that it had happened. He didn't. I mean, I know he swore in the press conference, but he didn't. It took him a while to get to that stage, and I think he was more annoyed at some of the questions he was being asked than what had happened out in that pitch. But yeah, just before we move on here, what I was going to say is it's been on socials all over the place today. We're well aware that, I mean, this is now Wednesday. That result happened on Sunday. We were maybe expecting something from the club, but I couldn't tell you the last time that Rangers put nothing out. And there's always a happy birthday or a lone player review or something going on during the week. But what have you made of the let's face it, it is radio silence, isn't it? Are we getting ghosted by Rangers?
We've all been there before, haven't we? It's not a nice feeling. Yeah, I mean, I think I seen they retweeted something earlier to do with I think it was boys going down to Manchester training wise, I think. So that was the first bit of activity seen in the Twitter account for a few days. The silence from the board, I'm kind of splitting this one because, and again, not that I'm saying it's right, I can understand it to an extent because it looks like they're backing the manager, right? So if that is the case, then they're sitting there going, well, what's the purpose in coming out and saying that again? We've already reiterated that in January with Patrick Stewart's statement that we are backing Philippe Clement and we're going to give him the season, right? But I also look at it from the perspective of that is such a humiliating result that you should probably have some sort of senior figure making some sort of statement. What would be in that statement? I'm not sure, but I certainly think there needs to be some sort of communication with the support, because the support are obviously going nuts here because of the scale of how poor that result was.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's a tough one. Yeah, I'm a little bit disappointed not to see anything, but I think they'll just argue and say, well, we've already backed the manager. We don't want to sack him, mid-season again, and that's it. This result's happened, and we're just going to move on from it. And at the same time, I can understand why a lot of the sport just don't think that is acceptable. So yeah, I can see both sides of that one, Kyle. But yeah, certainly, I think I would have liked to have heard from the club this week.
So AJWTF says he's been guaranteed the job for at least this season, and like I'm not.
That's what
saying,
it appears to be, doesn't it? That's what it looks like.
Well, this is what I was going to say. We've not got any inside information. We never claimed to be like that. We're just here to give our opinions on what we see is happening around the club, and I just don't know. Like that is what, again, that it just had that sort of presence about it. That press conference again was it. It doesn't matter. Like again, when he got asked that question off of Joshua Barry, like, are you expecting talks with the board? I couldn't think of a Rangers manager that wouldn't be expecting talks with the board. I mean, I don't know. Surely you should be expecting something off that. But do you think it is the fact?
Can you remember when Michael Beale came in after that Aberdeen result?
Oh,
he knew he was finished.
Yeah.
You could see it in his face. He knew it.
Yep.
Right? I didn't get that same vibe from Philippe Clement. Philippe Clement was very much like, no, I don't expect any talks with the board. Why would I? That, this is the project that we signed up to at the beginning of the season, and all parties are honouring that. And again, I understand it, right? It clearly looks like he has been promised the season. But I think my question back to that would be, if I had a sit down with Patrick Stewart, if you remember in his statement, it said that he wouldn't give any cast iron guarantees. I believe that was the quote. Cast iron guarantees for Philippe Clement to keep his job if results didn't improve, right? So my question would be, I don't think there can be a poorer result than what we just seen at the weekend. That for me clearly shows that results are not improving.
Yeah.
What else? What else has to give for the club to make a change here? I don't understand. Like it's your own statement, Patrick. You said it. If results don't improve, alluding to that there will be a change in the position. For me, that's the result that would justify that sort of reaction, regardless of whether you made an agreement at the beginning of the season, you signed and said you're going to get the season. It doesn't matter. If there's a compensation agreement in place, you look at that and you go, by the way, this has went too far now. It doesn't matter about any agreements happened at the beginning of this season. You've just been knocked out the cup by Queen's Park at home, and it's been already a poor season. We're going to end this now. That's it, finished.
But see if there is an agreement like that in place, that he's going to get to the end of the season. Because it's not a new thing on here that I've been saying that anytime anybody's ever asked me, like, what do you think about Clement, blah, 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 this, I was like, it doesn't matter, because I think regardless of what happens, he's here to the end of the season. If he has been told that, do you think that is what is leading to some of the complacency in the squad? Because for me, it just, again, it's just an opinion. I don't think the players are buying into what he's selling them on that training pitch. I don't get the vibes of that. Like, I could be totally off it, but I think a lot of people are feeling that same way now. Do you think if there has been an agreement like that, Patrick Stewart's come in and said that to him, is that what's leading to some complacency on the pitch?
Could be because professional footballers are human beings at the end of the day, and if they're in an environment that doesn't get the best out of them, then you might not get the best out of them. Simple as that. Like, if they're looking at it and going, do you know what's the point in me putting in all this extra effort at the moment, because Philippe Clement's got the season. He'll probably change at the end of the year because results aren't going our way. We're out of the title race. We've already lost the League Cup, whatever. And unfortunately, I think we've all said this for a long time. It looks like this Rangers squad turn up on European nights when the big lights are on and the TV cameras are there. This squad delivers. We've seen that. That's why we're sitting in the top 8.
Players can put themselves in the short window for a move.
Exactly. So I think certainly domestically the squad aren't buying into what Philippe Clement is doing. I think it's obvious. So yeah, maybe that is a symptom of what is going on behind the scenes, and the club feel okay, he's been given the season, so we'll kind of coast. Again, that to me falls on the manager. If you can't motivate those players in a Scottish Cup tie at home, then you shouldn't be the manager for me. Now, I like I always say, players have to take responsibility. A lot of big players in there that did not show up at the weekend. But we say this all the time in football. You can't sack a squad. You can't. It's not possible.
Yeah.
You sack the manager. So for me, that's the way I look at it. I just think, the club have put themselves in a difficult position here. They obviously want to give Clement the rest of the season, or they did before that result of the weekend. That would be my question back. I'd be like, I don't think he can get any worse. So if you're going to make the change, it should probably be now. And the reason why I would make the change now, and I would appoint an interim or whatever, I might come on to that, is because I have the fear that these players are going to regress. Right? We've got a lot of good players in there. I want these players, even if the season's not going to go the way you want for the team in terms of success, I still want those players developing, especially with a lot of the interest that we've seen in them. So I want these players to continue to get better. I want the environment to be, somewhere that these players can feel they can develop as well. And I'm not sure we're going to have that under Philippe Clement if there's that whole uncertainty around the manager and everyone feels like, it's probably coming towards the end and he'll go at the end of the season. If that's the case, he should go now for me.
Yeah, with virtually everything you've said today, it's very, very hard to disagree with that. My last sort of question and all this sort of stuff is, well, in terms of the CEO, I do find it really weird that we've not had anything publicly from Fraser Thornton yet, given that he's been a new appointed chairman. Not even a video similar to Patrick Stewart, just introducing himself, what his thoughts are. I suppose if he did it right now, all you'd be getting is, why is Clement still here and all that sort of stuff. But I mean, how long is too long before we hear from them? Because we're already hearing all this nonsense in the ether, I suppose, in terms of, because we're hearing stuff like Hugh Keevins and Super Scoreboard talking about a 50 grand salary for Clement, which seems wild to me, and basically loads of fans saying we are settling here, we are accepting that this result, because silence, that's what fans are going to think, is that the club are accepting that result was okay. So when should we expect to hear from him? And as an aside, what do you think of that? Well, ridiculous. Well, you know what my thoughts on it, but the ridiculous statement that Clement's on 50 grand a week.
In terms of the comments from the chairman, I honestly don't know. I don't know when that's going to come. It's probably not the right time to do it at the moment. I think both Fraser Thornton and Patrick Stewart have been around the club for a few of the match days, speaking to hospitality guests and things like that. But that's not going to suffice, is it? You're going to have to speak to the wider support, and he should. In terms of when that's going to come, I don't know. I would imagine if the club have been silent up until this point, they'll be silent for a while yet. In terms of the reported figures this week, when I first read the 50,000 stuff, I thought, not a chance. He's not on that. There's no way. I think that's turned out.
He looks so relaxed in these press conferences.
I know. I think I would be the same if I was sitting on 50 grand a week at Rangers. Yeah. So it looks like it's turned out. I always find these things really interesting, right? So that report comes out. I can't remember. Was it Monday? Maybe that report comes out. He's on 50,000 a week, and then the next day it's reported that actually, if Rangers wanted to remove the manager, it would be a 1.2 million compensation fee, which usually the way it works with that is you would pay up a year of his salary. I think it's different based on whatever the contracts are, certain break clauses, whatever. But to me, that lines up that it would be a year of his salary, which works out, I think earlier we spoke about this, 25 grand a week, roughly, right? Which probably makes the most sense. I think that lines up. If the figure is 1.2 million in compensation, first of all, I find it interesting. It's leaked straight after the speculation is on 50 grand a week. So for me, that's someone in the club getting that information out there to say he's not on 50 grand a week. We can assure you that. So performances are obviously bad, but we can assure you that manager is not on. Philippe Clement is not on 50,000 a week, but they've also put pressure on themselves there with that leak of information, because a lot of the support will now look at that and go, well, we felt it was going to be a lot higher than 1.2 million to remove this manager. That seems a realistic figure for us to be paying to remove Philippe Clement, and there's going to be a lot of clamour now that the club do that. So, look, it looks like the club can afford to remove Philippe Clement. So if they can afford to remove him, they clearly don't want to, right? They clearly don't want to for some sort of reason. We're never going to find that out. Never going to be privy to that information, unfortunately. Whether it's the promise of the rest of the season, whether they still believe in the project under Philippe Clement, it could be the case, unfortunately. But yeah, all of those figures being released at the same time, and I always find these things really interesting. I always think there's a reason why certain information's leaked. And it'll be interesting to follow that one as the season goes. Even if that's the case where you get to the end of the season and Philippe Clement is removing his position, you know now that the fee that the club are going to have to pay probably isn't going to be, stupid. Do you know what I mean? It's going to be a reasonable fee for the club to pay. So, I always find this information leak interesting, Kyle.
Yeah, and last question about all this stuff before we move on to the new academy appointments is, do you think that the club are waiting? Because I was just checking socials here and stuff like that. It was the 13th of January when Patrick Stewart came out and he was doing a root and branch football review of the club. We were told it would take to 6 to 12 weeks. It was going to go over everything. Do you think, surely they're not waiting on that to be finished before they make a decision on it? Because this is a thing I do find that bizarre at the moment. We will go on to talk about the academy appointments in there and the restructuring and reshuffling of that. I'm not really sure why that would be happening in the middle of a review. We've appointed an assistant manager in that time as well. I'm just... Are we just waiting on this review till we do something about it? Because it just everything the club is doing at the minute is suggesting to me that we are not going to let go of him anytime. Why the hell would you be appointing a new assistant manager and then letting the manager go 2 weeks after it, even if that?
Yeah, I mean, unless it's a club appointment and it's something that Neil Scalpin's got in mind for maybe a little bit of consistency in the backroom staff, because it is a lot more expensive if you bring in a manager and he brings all his staff and then you have to relieve all of the staff. It is expensive. So you do get a lot of managers that are willing to work with existing backroom staff at clubs, unless he looks at, is it Izam Shirai, I think is how you pronounce it. I might be wrong on that, so I apologise.
Yeah.
Unless he looks at that type of appointment and like, you're going to be the consistent kind of assistant in this club, and maybe the idea and the promise from the club is that you can develop here and you can then move on eventually and become a manager somewhere. So maybe that's in the logic behind that appointment. Maybe it isn't a direct appointment for Philippe Clement. In terms of the review itself, I'm not quite sure that review will have much to do with the manager's position, to be honest with you. I just think that review will be to do with probably a lot of areas the club that the support don't even think about, to be honest with you. It'll be to trying to understand whether that Rangers are making use of their financial output in the right way. There's likely lots of areas where we're spending money that you probably don't have to. And it looks like we've been doing that in the academy. Looks like that was maybe the first part of this review. They've found all their findings for that now, and they've got a plan in place and they're actioning it, which we'll come on to. But I don't think that review I don't think that'll be looking at the manager's position, to be honest with you. I think that'll be separate. I think that'll just be to do with the football club in terms of the background and everything that's going on. I would be worried if that review was a thing that was keeping Philippe Clement in place, and we'll have to go through that full review until we really assess your position. No, I think we can all see with the results on the pitch, which is the most important thing for a first-team manager. That's your review, right? The evidence is there. We can all see that this isn't good enough. So hopefully the club would be thinking along those lines as well.
Yeah, and just before we move on to the next topic, what would you like to see happening until the end of the season, and what are you expecting to see happening between now and the end of the season?
Yeah, that's a short.
Left,
I'll make this one short. For me, you would relieve Philippe Clement of his duties, and you would bring in an interim manager. I don't even think it's worth speculating over that, who that interim manager would be, because I think a lot of the support would just look at it and think, at least we've moved out Philippe Clement, who wasn't the best fit for the club. And we've got someone into the end of the season to see us through. And hopefully that then gives Patrick Stewart, the board, and everything within the club time to assess, the right candidate to come in the summer. So that would be my ideal scenario. You appoint an interim and we just move on from this. I don't expect that to happen. I expect Philippe Clement to get the season. I think he will. I think he'll see out the full season. Unless you see something completely disastrous where, he's knocked out the Europa League, heavy defeat, and then he goes on some sort of ridiculous run in the league again where he's lost 2 or 3 games in the spin, and the club just think, what's the point now of keeping him? We know he's going to go. So yeah, that's the way I think it'll go. I think the funny thing is, for me in all of this, that I don't think it matters now what Philippe Clement does for the rest of the season. The support are never going to take to him anymore. Like, the support want to see, if he's not relieved of his duties in the middle of the season, they're going to want to see that as soon as it hits June. They're going to want to see a statement from the club saying Philippe Clement is leaving and we're moving on to the next candidate. It doesn't matter what he does. I honestly believe, and this might sound ridiculous, I honestly think he could go on and win that Europa League and the fans still won't have him next year. Genuinely, that's how... That is the level that this has got to now. There's such a disconnect between the support and the manager. They're just never going to buy into him again. We've seen it with Giovanni Van Bronckhorst, didn't we? He didn't win the Europa League, but he took us to win within a penalty kick of winning it, and a few months later he's binned. So it's very difficult, I think, for the support to get behind this manager now, regardless of what happens for the rest of the season.
There we go. I've just asked you what would you like to happen to the end of the season, or what do you think will happen to the end of the season? And you said Philippe Clement will win the Europa League, and then we'll bin him after it. So
listen, I'd still enjoy the moment, regardless if I don't think he's the right manager. I would still enjoy it.
No, listen, I agree with what you're saying. I totally get the sentiment now. Listen, the next sort of bit we'll move on to here is the academy restructure. A couple of new appointments, which again I do find interesting. Maybe goes to what you said earlier on in terms of them looking at these things behind the scenes. Maybe the academy is one of the first areas they're going in, working with Niels Koppen and changing things as they're going along. But again, it would be helpful if that was communicated from the club, that they were. It's a work in progress, but Kevin Thompson and Stephen Smith, now the 2 under-18 coaches, there'll be a large focus on the under-18s rather than a B team. There's a new loan manager going in that will be predominantly dealing with B team players, how they're getting on progressing. What is your thoughts and opinions in this kind of changing direction, and especially 2 ex-players now? I know it's about Rangers Day, isn't it? We need more Rangers men in at the club, but is it more of the same because Kevin Thompson's been there before, or are you happy there are 2 Rangers guys? We're moving in a different direction in terms of loans, and we'll be focusing on under 18s.
Well, it's funny, Niels Koppen must be a Rangers dad then, because he was the one that came out with that and said that we needed more Rangers men in and around it. So that must be the case. He must be a Rangers dad now. Yeah, look, I've not been convinced with the academy set up for 3-4 years now. I think the B team's been an absolute waste of time, to be honest with you, because we've never been able to find a level for these boys to develop at. We've seen it with Alex Lowry, right? He was a big one I always talk about. He was absolutely coasting that Lowland League, but he couldn't make the step up to first team level. Even when he went to Hearts, the gap was massive, So the whole idea of the B team in the academy is that you're preparing these boys to play first team level, and we've never been able to find that. So I think the changes that are getting put in place, I support. I would much rather these boys going out and loan and just getting experience playing in the lower leagues in Scotland, bringing them back when they're around 19, 20 and assessing whether they're going to make it here. If they can't make it here, we just move them on and you go on to the next one. That's what academy football is all about. You're not just trying to develop boys to make it in Rangers first team. You're just trying to develop footballers, right? So they can go and play in other leagues in Scotland, and we have a duty to do that. All the clubs in Scotland have a duty to try and produce good Scottish players, and we haven't seen that for a long time. So yeah, I'm happy to see that we're making some changes to the academy. Whether it works out, you're just going to have to wait and see. I really like Kevin Thompson. I think most of the support really like Kevin Thompson, and he's shown he's a good coach at that level and also at first team level. He showed that with Kelty Hearts, and I'm surprised he's never had an opportunity to go back in. So yeah, getting him in amongst the academy again, I think is a good thing. He's got experience of working with players of that age, and the loan manager. I think you mentioned it there. That is a kind of new concept in football. The guy I always look at for that was David Weir. David Weir, he went to Brighton as their loan manager. That was his role that he started in, and now he's up at their technical director. So, not necessarily saying that's the way it should work at Rangers, but my point is that role has been there for a while in football, and you can see Brighton have a fully functioning kind of track of players being developed, and whether they go into Brighton's first team or they're sold on for money, they've got that there. So yeah, look, I think we'll have to wait and see with the restructuring, but I think it's long overdue.
Yeah, no, I think that's fair enough. Before we move on to Hearts, I just want to pick up this comment here from James Glasgow, and he says, all you podders always going on about the club, if it's doing its job, they will have a list of candidates, yet you want an interim manager. That doesn't make sense. I think I know where we're coming from there on that one, James, but the way I'm looking at it is it's the only thing we haven't, it's not, it's when the manager is appointed. I don't want him to join in the middle of a season again, because it's not worked out. It's not worked out. The fact if you're playing stinking foot, you're already in a hiding to nothing going into that next season. If you already have a wave of negativity behind you, at least if you have a manager and you appoint him in at the start of the season, he's got fresh ideas with the players, a full pre-season with them. There's no excuses. There's no hiding places, because I feel like Gio said it. I feel like Beale said it. Clement has said it at times as well. I've not had a full pre-season with these guys, so I think it's more about the timing of the appointment rather than, because I just want it to be considered. But anyway, move on to the Hearts game here. I know it's really difficult to get up for a Hearts game. We'll see what players are actually going to show up on that day, but listen, I know there is only one answer to this, but what sort of response are you expecting to see? And are you expecting to see any drastic changes to that lineup other than Bayrami getting fired out of the Edinburgh Cannon so he's not playing on the team that day?
Oh, we won't talk about him at the moment because aye, that's a bad one. Unfortunately, it's not a good trait to have, I think. But when there's not a lot of expectation on this Rangers side, they usually deliver. We've seen that in European performances, and I don't think the support will be going into this game at the weekend against Hearts and expecting a fabulous performance, right? So again, at the same time, wouldn't it shock me if you go to Tynecastle and you end up getting a result? Now, the minimum is a win, because he can't, this away form in general under Philippe Clement is abysmal. We spoke about it numerous times before. So I don't know if I'm expecting a big response, to be honest with you, based on how bad a performance that was last week. And I wonder if there's a bit of scar tissue in there. But I'm certainly hoping and really wanting a response. We've got to see something. Unfortunately, there's not a lot to play for now. So all you've got to do is look at each game and think, what can we get out of it? And winning in Tynecastle would be a big result, because Hearts have found a little bit of form lately. It's always typical that we seem to run into teams once they find a bit of form, isn't it? And we're going to their home ground. But look, we've done reasonably well at Tynecastle over the last few years. I think it's a game that hopefully they can go into. There'll be a lot of the support there is always good at Tynecastle. There'll be all the energy in the stands. Hopefully they can feed off that. As usual, the away support will be there for Rangers. They follow them everywhere. And I think, again, sometimes the players take these things for granted. They're not going to get that every single club they go to. If they go down south, whatever, you might get big support behind you, but you're never going to get a support like we bring. So, yeah, I'm hoping to see a response. But, yeah, I don't know if I'm expecting to see that, if that makes sense, Kyle.
Yeah, it's what we're hoping and what we're expecting are two very, very different things with Rangers these days, and that's where it's scunnering the lot of us. But listen, I think that just about wraps it up. I feel, I don't know how, but I do feel slightly better after getting a lot of that off my chest, Ross, and hopefully you're the same. But listen, thank you to everybody who's interacted tonight, joining in the comments. Just remember to give us a wee like and subscribe. Check us out on all the usual socials, and if you like your podcast on audio, we're on Spotify and Apple as well. But take care, everybody, and we'll see you all again